The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, three little pigs lived together with their mother. As they grew bigger, their small house became too crowded, so at last she sent them off into the world to seek their fortunes. "Be careful," she said. "Here you are safe from the big bad wolf, but out there you will need to build strong houses." The pigs set off happily. After a short time, the first little pig met a farmer pulling a cartload of straw. "Please, may I have some straw to build a house?" the little pig asked. "Certainly," the farmer said, "but it won't make a very strong house." The little pig didn't listen. He took the bundles of straw and stacked them up to make a house. When it was finished, he went inside for a rest. Soon the big bad wolf came down the road. He hadn't eaten all day. When he saw the new house of straw, his tummy rumbled and he licked his lips. "I smell piggy," he said to himself. "Yum." He peeked in through the window. Little pig, let me come in," he growled. "No way," the pig shouted. "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin." "Well, this house doesn't look very strong," the wolf said. "I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." So he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. Straw flew everywhere, and the little pig ran away as fast as he could. The second little pig walked a little farther. At last he came across a woodcutter with a pile of sticks. "Please, could I have some sticks to build a house?" the little pig asked. "Certainly," said the woodcutter. "Take as many as you like, but they won't make a very strong house." The second little pig didn't listen. He picked up all the sticks he could carry and took them to a clearing. He piled them up to make a cozy house. When it was finished, he went inside and settled down with a cup of tea. The big bad wolf was cross and hungry. When he saw the house of sticks, his tummy grumbled and he licked his lips. "I smell piggy," he said to himself. "Yum, yum." He pushed his nose against the door. Little pig, let me come in," he growled. "No way," the second little pig shouted. "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin." "Well, this house doesn't look very strong," the wolf said. "I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." And so he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The sticks tumbled to the ground, and the little pig ran away as fast as he could. The third little pig walked farther still until he saw a builder with a pile of bricks. The builder was just finishing work. "Please, could I have some bricks to build a little house?" the third little pig asked. "Certainly," said the builder. "Those are leftovers. Take as many as you want." So the third little pig carried the bricks away and built a beautiful house. When he was finished, he went inside, put a pot of water on the fire, and started to make some soup. After a while, his two brothers came running up the path. "Let us in!" they shouted. "There's a big bad wolf coming!" The third little pig quickly let them in. They locked and bolted the door and sat down to wait. Before long, the big bad wolf came huffing and puffing up the path. When he saw the new brick house, his tummy rumbled and grumbled, and he licked his lips. "I smell piggy and soup," he said to himself. "Yum, yum, yum." He knocked hard on the door. Little pig, let me come in," he roared. "No way," the third little pig shouted. "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin." "Well then," the wolf said, "I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." And so he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed. But the house stood firm. The wolf looked up and saw the chimney. He climbed onto the roof, and down the chimney he went, straight into the pot of hot soup. "Ow!" He jumped out of the pot and ran, yowling and howling, out into the cool night. The big bad wolf ran up the path, over the hills and far away, never to be seen again. The three little pigs lived happily ever after, all together in the strong brick house. The end. Puss in Boots. There once was an old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left the mill to his oldest son. The middle son was given the donkeys. The youngest son, a kind man who had always put his father and brothers before him, was left nothing but his father's cat. "What will become of me?" said the young miller's son, with a sigh, looking at his cat. "Buy me a fine pair of boots, and I will make your fortune, for your father thought you deserved it," replied the cat. A talking cat! The miller's son could not believe his ears. So the miller's son bought the cat a fine pair of boots, and the two of them set off to seek their fortune. After a while they came to a grand palace. "Wouldn't it be wonderful to live so grandly?" said the miller's son. Later, while the miller's son was sleeping, the cat went hunting and caught a rabbit. He put it in a sack and took it to the palace. "A gift to the king from my master, the Marquis of Carabas," said the cat, presenting it to the king. The cat went back to the miller's son and told him what he had done. "Now the king will want to know who the Marquis of Carabas is," laughed the cat. A clever cat! The miller's son could not believe his ears. Every day for a week the cat delivered a gift to the king, each time saying it was from the Marquis of Carabas. After a while, the king became very curious and decided he'd like his daughter to meet this mysterious nobleman, whoever he might be. When the cat heard that the king and his daughter were on their way, he wasted no time. "You must take off all your clothes and stand in the river," the cat told his master. The puzzled miller's son did as he was told, and the cat hid his master's tattered old clothes behind a rock. When the cat heard the king's carriage approaching, he jumped onto the road and begged for help. "Your gracious majesty," said the cat, "my master was robbed of all his clothes while he was bathing in the river." The king gave the miller's son a suit of fine clothes to wear. "Please join us in the carriage," said the king. So the cat opened the door, and the miller's son climbed in. He looked very handsome in his new suit. The king's daughter fell in love with him at once. The cat ran ahead, cutting through the surrounding countryside. Every time he met people working in the fields, he told them, "If the king stops to ask who owns this land, you must tell him it belongs to the Marquis of Carabas." Beyond the fields, the cat reached a grand castle. He spoke to the people working in a field next to it, and discovered that it belonged to a fierce orc. The cat stood bravely in his boots and knocked on the castle door. "Who dares disturb me?" roared a voice from inside the castle. "I have heard that you are a very clever orc," called the cat. "I have come to see what tricks you can do." The orc opened the door and immediately changed himself into a great snarling lion. The cat felt scared, but he didn't show it. "That is quite a clever trick," said the cat, "but a lion is a very large creature. I think it would be a much better trick to change into something very small, like a mouse." The orc liked to show off his tricks. He changed at once into a little mouse. The cat pounced on the mouse and ate him up. Then the cat went into the castle and told all of the servants that their new master was the Marquis of Carabas. They were glad to be rid of the fierce orc, so they did not complain. "The king is on his way to visit, and you must prepare a grand feast to welcome him," said the cat. When the king's carriage arrived at the castle, the cat was waiting to welcome him.
"Your gracious majesty," he purred, "welcome to the home of my master, the Marquis of Carabas." A cunning cat. The miller's son could not believe his eyes. "You must ask for the princess's hand in marriage," whispered the cunning cat to his master. The miller's son did as he was told. The king, who was impressed by everything he saw, agreed. Soon the Marquis of Carabas and his wife were married, and they lived a very happy life together. The cat was made a lord of their court and was given the most splendid clothes, which he wore proudly along with those fine boots that the miller's son had bought him.
The Little Red Hen. There once was a little red hen who lived on a farm with her friends, a sleepy cat, a lazy pig, and a stuck-up duck. One day the little red hen was scratching around in the farmyard when she found some grains of wheat. She was just about to peck them up when she stopped and thought. "If I plant these grains of wheat instead of eating them," she said to herself, "they will grow tall and strong and make more wheat." So she tucked the grains of wheat into her apron and went to see her friends. "Who will help me plant these grains of wheat?" she asked. The cat opened one eye. "Not I," she said. "I'm too tired." "Not I," snorted the pig. "It's far too hot to work." "Not I," quacked the duck, and stood on one foot. So the little red hen found a patch of soil. She moved the stones and dug the earth. She made a row of holes and planted all the grains of wheat. Then she watered them carefully and left them to grow. All summer the sun shone on the grains of wheat, and the rain fell on them. Each day the little red hen checked that they were not too dry or too wet. She pulled up the weeds and made sure the wheat had space to grow. At last the wheat was strong and tall with fat, golden grains. "This wheat is ready to harvest," she said to herself. "That will be a lot of work." The little red hen went to see her friends. "I have worked all summer and the wheat is ready. Who will help me harvest it?" she asked. The cat stretched lazily. "Not I," she said. "It's time for my nap." "Not I," snorted the pig. "I need to roll in the mud." "Not I," quacked the duck, and she preened her feathers. So the little red hen took her tools and went to harvest the wheat. She cut down the wheat stalks and piled them up neatly. When she had finished, she went back to her friends. "I have worked all day to cut down the wheat," she said. "Who will help me make it ready for the mill?" The cat yawned. "Not I," she said. "I'm sleepy." "Not I," snorted the pig. "I'm going to lie in the sun." "Not I," quacked the duck, and tucked her head under her wing. So the little red hen went back to the field alone. She beat the wheat to free the grains from the stalks and carried away the straw. The wind blew and the little red hen worked long and hard. At last she swept up the wheat and put it into a sack. She carried it back to her friends. "I have worked all day to prepare the wheat," she said. "Who will help me carry it to the mill?" "Not I," said the cat. "I need a rest." "Not I," snorted the pig. "It looks far too heavy." "Not I," quacked the duck, and she waddled away to the pond. So the little red hen carried the heavy sack of wheat all the way to the mill. The kind miller ground the wheat to flour and poured it back into the sack. Then the little red hen carried it all the way home again. The little red hen was exhausted. "I have carried the wheat to the mill and had it ground to flour," she said. "Who will help me bake it into bread?" "Not I," said the cat as she curled up ready to sleep. "Not I," snorted the pig. "It's nearly time for my dinner." "Not I," quacked the duck, and she sat on the ground. So the little red hen made the flour into dough and kneaded it. She shaped it into a loaf and put it in the oven to bake. After a while, a delicious smell wafted from the kitchen. The sleepy cat opened her eyes. The lazy pig came to stand by the oven. The stuck-up duck waddled in. At last the bread was cooked. The little red hen carried the loaf to the table. It had a beautiful golden crust on the top and was creamy white inside. It smelled wonderful. "Who will help me eat this loaf of bread?" the little red hen asked quietly. "I will," said the sleepy cat, washing her paws with her tongue. "I will," grunted the lazy pig, licking his lips. "I will," quacked the stuck-up duck, flapping her wings. "No, you will not," the little red hen said. "I planted the grains and watched them grow. I harvested the wheat and took it to the mill. I ground the flour and baked the bread. My chicks and I will eat the loaf." And that is what they did. The little red hen and her little chicks ate up every crumb of the hot, fresh bread. The end.
Beauty and the Beast. There once was a rich merchant who had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter had a kind heart, unlike her jealous sisters. She was called Beauty. Everything changed one winter when the merchant lost all his money and was forced to move into a little cottage. The 2 elder daughters wept in anger, fearing no one would marry them now. They would stay in bed all day, while Beauty rose at 4 each morning and cleaned the cottage and cooked their meals. One day, the merchant received good news. One of his ships had been found, which meant he would have money again. He immediately set off for town. "Bring me back a velvet cape," demanded the eldest sister. "And I'll have a silk gown," added the second sister. "What about you, Beauty?" asked her father kindly. "Please bring me a rose, father," said Beauty politely. Beauty worried terribly about her father and longed for his safe return, but she knew her sisters would tease her mercilessly if she said this. Sadly, the merchant had been given the wrong information. It was not his ship that had been found after all. With a heavy heart, he rowed back, failing to notice the snow falling so thickly. Soon he was lost. He wandered for hours, and when night fell, he began to despair. At last he spotted a golden light coming from a great castle. Pushing on the open door, he found himself inside a dining hall, where a fire blazed and a table was laid for one person. But there was no one to greet him. At last he said to himself, "I can wait no longer. Surely the kind master will pardon me if I eat alone." After a good night's sleep, the merchant set off. Wending his way through a scented rose garden, he was reminded of Beauty's request. As he broke off a single red rose, there was a thunderous roar, and a hideous creature appeared before him. "So this is how you repay my kindness," snarled the creature. "I saved your life, but you choose to steal the thing I love the most. You deserve to die." "Forgive me, Lord," begged the merchant. "I only wanted to pluck a rose for my youngest daughter." "Call me beast," snapped the creature. "I will spare your life if one of your daughters comes to stay with me, of her own free will. But if none of them agrees, you must return within 3 months. With a sad heart, the merchant agreed. On hearing her father's story, Beauty persuaded him to take her to the beast's castle. When she arrived, she could hardly dare look at the creature. But Beauty very soon came to realize that he had a good heart. One evening, as he joined her for supper, the beast asked her, "Do you find me ugly?" And for the first time, Beauty looked at his face. "Yes, but you are very kind," she replied honestly. The beast seemed pleased by her answer, and suddenly asked if she would be his wife. "No, beast," she replied simply, and the beast let out a painful cry. As the time passed, Beauty came to enjoy her life at the castle. She had everything she needed. As a sign of his love for her, the beast gave Beauty a magic mirror to show her what was happening at home. One day, as she looked into the mirror, she saw her father was ill. "I must go to my father," she told the beast. "If you let me leave, I promise I will return." Heartened by these words, the beast agreed. "Take your mirror with you," he said, "and remember, if you do not return in 1 week, I shall die of grief." Beauty's father was overjoyed to see her, and he soon became well again. The foolish sisters had both married, but were unhappy, so they tricked Beauty into staying longer than the week. One day, when Beauty was looking in her magic mirror, she saw the beast was ill. She knew she had to return. Arriving back at the castle, she found him close to death. "You broke your promise," the beast whispered, "and now I must die." "No, no!" cried Beauty in anguish, and at that moment she knew she loved him. "I want to be your wife," she pleaded, and as her tears fell on the beast's face, a bright light dazzled her. Suddenly, standing before her was the most handsome man she had ever set eyes on. "Where is the beast?" she cried. "I was your beast," smiled the young man. "By choosing to stay with me and promising to be my wife, you have broken the spell." Beauty and her prince were soon married and lived happily in their castle. The end.
Pinocchio. There once was a carpenter named Geppetto. One day he was walking through an enchanted forest when he heard a voice. "Hello," it said. Geppetto looked around and soon realized that the voice was coming from a magic piece of wood. "Talking wood," he thought. "How unusual." Geppetto took the magic wood home and carved a little puppet boy from it. He gave the boy a suit of clothes and a hat with a feather in it. The wooden boy danced around the room for Geppetto and made him laugh. "Hello," he said. Geppetto named the boy Pinocchio. "You must go to school like the other children," Geppetto told him. So the next morning, Pinocchio skipped off to school on his wooden legs. As he went along, a cricket hopped up onto his shoulder. "You look like you could use a friend," he told Pinocchio. "I will help you learn right from wrong." A little farther down the road, Pinocchio met a fox and a cat. They had heard the sound of lunch money jingling in his pocket. "Don't bother going to school," said the fox. "Come and play with us instead." Pinocchio, not knowing any better, thought that sounded like a good idea. "I don't think you are doing the right thing," the cricket told him. "You promised your father you would go to school." But Pinocchio paid no attention to the cricket. The cat and the fox led Pinocchio into a dark forest. "If you plant your money here, it will grow into a money tree," they told him. "Just come back tomorrow and you'll see." "That doesn't sound right," said the cricket. "That money was for your lunch." But Pinocchio didn't listen. He dug a hole in the ground and buried the coins in it. Then Pinocchio went home, feeling very hungry. He did not tell his father that he hadn't been to school. The next morning, Pinocchio didn't go to school either. Instead, with the cricket on his shoulder, he skipped into the forest to find his money tree. When Pinocchio reached the spot where he'd buried his coins, there was no money tree. He dug down to look for the coins he had planted, but they were gone. "The fox and the cat have played a trick on you," said the cricket. "They just wanted to get your money." Pinocchio felt rather silly, but he pretended he didn't care. He stomped off into the forest. "I'm going on an adventure," he said. The little cricket begged him to go to Geppetto, but Pinocchio walked on until it was dark and he was a little scared. Soon they came to a tiny cottage. Pinocchio ran to the door and knocked loudly. A pretty fairy with turquoise hair answered the door. "We're lost," explained Pinocchio. "Please, can you help us?" The fairy invited them in and gave them some food. "Why are you so far from your home?" she asked kindly. Pinocchio did not want to tell her that he had disobeyed his father. "I was chased by a giant," he lied. Suddenly Pinocchio's nose grew a little. "The giant was taller than the trees," continued Pinocchio. Pinocchio's nose grew some more. "And I ran into the forest to escape," he continued. And Pinocchio's nose grew again. He touched it in wonder. "I've put a spell on you," said the fairy. "Every time you tell a lie, your wooden nose will grow." Pinocchio began to cry. How he wished he had gone to school as his father had said. "I won't tell any more lies," promised Pinocchio. The fairy called some friendly woodpeckers who pecked at Pinocchio's long nose until it was back to the way it used to be. In the morning, Pinocchio rushed back through the forest with the little cricket perched on his shoulder. "From now on, I will do just as my father tells me," he said. But when he got home, Geppetto wasn't there. Instead, there was a note on the kitchen table. "Dear Pinocchio, I have gone to look for you. I miss you, my son. Your loving father, Geppetto." Pinocchio was very sad. He knew he had caused a lot of trouble. "We must find my father and bring him home," he sobbed. So he and the cricket set off again at once. They began their search down by the river. Pinocchio stood too near the edge of the water, and he fell in with a splash. The cricket jumped in to help him, but they were both swallowed by an enormous fish. There, in the fish's tummy, they found Geppetto. Pinocchio hugged his father tightly. "I won't leave you again," he said. The clever wooden boy took the feather from his hat and tickled the fish. "Ah, ah, ah, chew!" The fish gave a mighty sneeze, and Geppetto, Pinocchio, and the cricket shot back out through the fish's mouth and landed on the bank of the river. That night, when Pinocchio was tucked into his own little bed, fast asleep, the fairy with the turquoise hair flew in through his window. "You're a good, brave boy," she said as he slept, and she kissed him on the forehead. When Pinocchio awoke the next morning, he found that he was no longer made from wood. He was a real boy. From then on, he was always a good son to Geppetto and the best of friends with the cricket, who didn't need to tell him right from wrong ever again. The end.
The Elves and the Shoemaker. There once was a shoemaker who lived with his wife. Although they worked from dawn until dusk, they were very poor. "We only have enough leather to make one more pair of shoes to sell," the shoemaker told his wife one day. "What will become of us?" asked the shoemaker's wife. "How can we live without money?" The shoemaker shook his head sadly. He cut out the leather and left it on the workbench, ready to start work the next morning. Then the couple went to bed with heavy hearts. In the middle of the night, when the house was quiet and pale moonlight shone into the workshop, 2 elves appeared. They were dressed in rags, but had eyes as bright as buttons. They explored the workshop, balancing on cotton reels and peering into cupboards. Soon they found the leather. Elves are busy little creatures, and so they set to work at once, snipping and sewing. As they worked, they sang, "Busy little elves we are, working by the pale moonlight. While the humans are asleep, we are busy through the night." By dawn, the 2 little elves had finished their work and disappeared. When the shoemaker came to start work the next morning, he could not believe his eyes. There, on his workbench, was the finest pair of shoes he had ever seen. "The stitches are so delicate," he said as he showed his astonished wife the beautiful shoes. "I will place them in my window for everyone to see." Soon, a rich gentleman walked by the shop. He saw the stylish shoes and came inside. The rich gentleman tried on the shoes, and they fit perfectly. He was so delighted that he gave the shoemaker twice the asking price. "I can buy more leather," said the shoemaker happily to his wife. That evening, the shoemaker cut out the leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. He left it on his workbench for the next morning. In the middle of the night, the 2 elves appeared again. They explored the workshop, climbed on the tools, and swinging from shoelaces. Soon they found the leather. The elves set to work at once, snipping and sewing. As they worked, they sang, "2 little elves we are, working by the pale moonlight. While the humans are asleep, we are busy through the night." By dawn, the 2 little elves had finished their work and disappeared. Once again, the shoemaker came into his workshop and found the shoes, neatly finished on his bench. The shoemaker placed them in his window. By now, the rich gentleman had told his friends about the shoemaker's fine work. The 2 pairs of shoes sold that same day for more money than the shoemaker could have ever dreamed of. The shoemaker now had enough money to buy leather to make 4 new pairs of shoes. "But who can be helping us?" asked the shoemaker's wife. That evening, the shoemaker cut out the leather for 4 more pairs of shoes. He left it on his workbench as usual. Then the shoemaker and his wife hid and waited. In the middle of the night, they watched in amazement as the 2 little elves appeared. As usual, the elves explored the workshop. They danced with colorful ribbons and juggled pretty beads. Soon they found the leather. Again, the elves set to work, snipping and sewing. As they worked, they sang, "Busy little elves we are, working by the pale moonlight. While the humans are asleep, we are busy through the night." By dawn, the 2 little elves had finished their work and disappeared. "We must repay our little helpers for their kindness," said the shoemaker to his wife. The couple thought hard about what they could do to thank the elves. They were dressed in rags," said the shoemaker's wife. "Why don't we make them some fine new clothes?" Although they were now very busy in their shop, the shoemaker and his wife spent every spare moment they had making their gifts for the elves. They cut out fine cloth and leather and sewed tiny seams. Soon they had made 2 little pairs of trousers, 2 smart coats, 2 sturdy pairs of boots, and 2 warm woolly scarves. They placed the little outfits on the workbench for the elves to find. That night, when the house was quiet and pale moonlight shone into the workshop, the shoemaker and his wife hid and waited. They watched happily as the 2 little elves appeared. As usual, the elves explored the workshop. They made a tightrope from thread and bounced on a pincushion. Soon they found their tiny little outfits. They were delighted. They put on the trousers, the coats, the boots, and the scarves, and danced merrily around the workbench. And as they danced, they sang, "Handsome little elves we are, dancing by the pale moonlight. While the humans are asleep, we make merry through the night." And then the smart little elves put on their hats and disappeared. The shoemaker and his wife never saw the little elves again, but the couple continued to make fine shoes for their shop, and from that day on they always prospered. The end.
Peter and the Wolf. Peter lived with his grandfather in a little cottage in the valley. Grandfather taught him to be kind to the animals, and Peter soon became friends with many woodland creatures. Grandfather also taught Peter about the dangers of living in the woods and how he must always be on the alert for wolves, which is why Grandfather insisted that the cottage gate was kept closed. Early one morning, Peter woke before Grandfather, and as the sun was starting to rise above the mountains, he set off to play. Peter was so eager that he forgot to close the gate. He ran into the big green meadow. Seeing the gate wide open, the duck waddled through the yard and followed Peter. Peter headed for his favorite tree, where his friend, a little bird, was perched. "Morning, Peter," the bird chirped happily. Peter climbed onto the lower branch and started chatting. Everywhere was so quiet, there wasn't even a ripple on the pond in the meadow. Then suddenly they heard an excited quack. "Oh no, I forgot to close the gate," cried Peter. "Why did you follow me?" he asked the excited duck. "Grandfather is going to be so cross." "Quack, quack," replied Duck, heading straight for the pond. Now Duck and the little bird always found something to argue about. As Duck waddled along, the little bird joined them. "What kind of a bird are you if you can't fly?" he chirped. "And what kind of a bird are you if you can't swim?" replied the duck, before diving into the pond with a big splash. And as the duck swam and the bird hopped along the side of the pond, they continued to argue. Suddenly, Peter noticed a cat ready to pounce on the bird. "Look out!" cried Peter, and in a flash the little bird was back in the tree again. The cat stared in surprise as the duck flapped her wings wildly. Then the cat turned his attention to the bird once more and began to circle the tree. He wondered if he could climb up quickly enough to catch the little creature before it flew away again. "It certainly isn't quiet any more," smiled Peter as he watched in amusement, but then an angry voice made him jump. "Peter! Peter! How could you leave the gate open?" cried Grandfather, running across the meadow. "What if a wolf had come?" "Boys like me are not afraid of wolves," replied Peter, but Grandfather did not want to hear this. He led Peter across the meadow and back to the cottage. As Peter waited behind the gate, he realized that Grandfather did know best, for at that moment a big gray wolf appeared. Seeing the little duck swimming on the pond, the wolf bared his teeth and licked his lips. The duck jumped out of the pond in fright at the sight of the wolf, and in no time the wolf was chasing the little duck across the field. No matter how hard she ran, she couldn't escape from the wolf. Nearer and nearer came the wolf, until, snap! The duck disappeared. Quick as a flash, the cat climbed the tree. Soon the wolf began to circle, staring up with his greedy eyes. The cat stared back. He wasn't afraid, but the wolf was only interested in the little bird. He bared his teeth and snarled. Watching in horror, Peter wasted no time. He grabbed some rope and made a lasso. He knew he couldn't let the wolf see him, so he carefully crawled toward his friends. Then he climbed the little wall beside the tree and called out, "Listen carefully. Bird, fly just above the wolf's head, but take care he doesn't catch you." The little bird did as he was told. As the wolf snapped, the bird swooped up and down just out of reach. While the clever bird distracted the wolf, Peter leapt onto the tree. He tied the end of the rope to a branch and dropped the lasso over the wolf's tail. The more the wolf jumped, the more the rope tightened around his tail, and the more angry he became. Just then, some hunters appeared, following the trail of the wolf. "We've caught the wolf!" cried Peter. "Help us to take him to the zoo!" The hunters were happy to help. At the head of the group was Peter, followed by the hunters leading the wolf. Grandfather trailed along at the back, still cross with Peter for disobeying him. If Peter hadn't caught the wolf, what then? Grumbled Grandfather. He was not happy that Peter took such a risk. But Peter and I were too clever for the wolf, the little bird told Grandfather. Now if you listened very carefully as the group passed by, you would just hear a faint quack. The wolf was in such a hurry when he ate the duck that he swallowed the bird whole, and the brave creature was still alive. The end.
The Tortoise and the Hare. The Hare and the Tortoise were neighbors. Hare was always in a hurry, rushing from one important task to another. He was so fast and busy that sometimes he could barely remember where he was going. Tortoise, on the other hand, plodded steadily along. He didn't go to many different places in a day, but he always got to where he needed to be. One day, Tortoise was walking slowly along the road when Hare sped past him. Hare looked over his shoulder and called out, "Hurry up, Tortoise! You'll never get there!" "I will," Tortoise said calmly. "I will. Slow but steady." Hare turned back and ran around Tortoise 3 times, laughing. Then he ran on. Half an hour later, Hare came back. Tortoise was still going in the same direction, and he hadn't gotten very far. Hare laughed. "You're so slow," he said. "How do you ever get anywhere?" "Look," Tortoise said, "one step at a time, one foot after the other, slow but steady." "You're hopeless," Hare said. "It will take you all day just to get to the end of the road." At last, Tortoise was too cross to ignore Hare any longer. "I get everywhere I want to go," he said, "and if you don't believe me, I'll challenge you to a race. You can pick the route, the day, and the time." Hare laughed until he fell over. He rolled around on the floor, tears running along his whiskers. "A race?" he gasped. "Between you and me? That's ridiculous. You don't stand a chance." "Are you scared?" Tortoise asked. "Because if not, let's do it." Hare could hardly stop laughing, but they arranged the race for the next day and asked Fox to judge it. They would start from an old oak tree and race all the way to the river. Tortoise set out early that evening so that he would be at the start line on time in the morning. Hare went home for a long sleep and got up late. He ran to the oak tree and found Tortoise ready and waiting. All the other animals had come out to watch. "Fox is waiting for you at the river," Bear said. "We can start whenever you're ready." Hare and Tortoise got into position. "On your marks," said Tortoise. "Get set," said Hare. "Go!" shouted all the animals. And off went the Tortoise and the Hare. Hare sprinted ahead, bounding along the path. Tortoise lifted one foot and put it down. Then he lifted the other foot and put it down. Slowly, slowly. By the time Tortoise reached the first bush, Hare was a tiny spot in the distance. By the time he reached the second bush, Hare was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes, Hare could see the river ahead. He paused and looked around. He couldn't see Tortoise at all. "He is so slow," he laughed to himself. "He won't be here for hours. I might as well have a rest." So Hare sat down under a tree not far from the finish line. The sun was warm, and the lazy buzz of bees visiting the flowers around him was soothing. Soon Hare dozed off. Back along the path, Tortoise kept on, slow but steady, one step at a time, one foot after the other. After an hour, Hare woke up and peered into the distance. He could just see Tortoise coming toward him, slow but steady, and still far away. "He's so slow," Hare said to himself. "He won't be here for hours. I might as well go back to sleep." And that's just what he did. Tortoise kept on, Slow but steady, his heavy shell wobbling along the path, Hare slept on in the hot sun. When Hare woke up, he couldn't see Tortoise anywhere. "Where's he gone?" he said. "He won't be here for hours. I'm sure I could just go back to sleep." But it was late afternoon, and the sun was low in the sky. "I'm sick of this race," he said to himself. "I should finish so I can go home and nap in my own bed." And he sprang up and ran as fast as he could to the finish line. Tortoise was waiting for him by the river. "Where have you been?" asked Tortoise. "I've been here for hours. You're so slow." Hare tried to explain, but neither Tortoise nor Fox would listen. "But I'm faster," Hare complained. "It's not fair." "The rules were simple," Fox said. "Tortoise won." "The race was to get here first." Tortoise smiled. "Not to run fastest. Slow and steady wins the race." And slowly, steadily, he turned around to begin his journey home. The end.
Aladdin. Once upon a time, a boy named Aladdin lived with his mother. They were so poor that every day it was a struggle to find enough money for food. One day, a man came to their shack saying he was Aladdin's long-lost uncle. When he said he would help Aladdin make his fortune, Aladdin and his mother were delighted. Aladdin traveled with him into the desert until they came to a rock. The man pushed it aside, revealing a hidden cave. "You must climb down into this cave and fetch a lamp that you will find there," he said. "Bring it to me. Don't touch anything except the lamp. Wear this magic ring to protect you." Aladdin was afraid, but he dared not argue with his uncle. He put on the magic ring and climbed into the cave. As soon as he was through the entrance, his eyes grew wide with wonder. All around, piles of gold and jewels stretched from floor to ceiling. Gemstones glittered in the dim light. Just one ruby would make Aladdin and his mother rich, but he did as he had promised and touched nothing. At last he found a dull brass lamp. "Surely this can't be it," Aladdin thought, but he took it back to his uncle. When he got to the opening, he found he couldn't climb out of the cave holding the lamp. "Pass it to me," his uncle said. "Then I will help you out." "Help me up first, uncle," Aladdin replied, "and then I will give you the lamp." "No," the man shouted. "First give me the lamp." When Aladdin refused, the man became angry. He rolled the stone over the opening to the cave, trapping Aladdin in the dark. "Uncle!" Aladdin shouted. "Let me out!" "Ha!" the man shouted back. "I'm not your uncle, fool. I'm a sorcerer. You can stay there and die if you won't give me the lamp." Aladdin wrung his hands in despair. As he did so, he rubbed the magic ring the sorcerer had given him for protection. Suddenly a genie sprang out. "I am the genie of the ring. What do you require, O master?" The genie bowed. Aladdin was astonished, but he thought quickly. "Please take me home to my mother," he said, and immediately he was outside his mother's house. He told her everything that had happened, and she hugged him with relief. "Oh, but Aladdin," she cried, "we are still poor." The next day, Aladdin looked at the lamp he had fetched from the cave. "It doesn't look like much," he thought, and he started to polish it, hoping he could sell it to get money for food. As soon as he rubbed the lamp, another genie appeared. "I am the genie of the lamp. What do you require, O Lord?" the genie asked. This time, Aladdin knew what to do. He asked the genie to bring food and money so that he and his mother could live in comfort. Life went on happily until one day Aladdin saw the beautiful daughter of the emperor. He fell in love and felt that he couldn't live without her, But how could he marry a princess? Aladdin thought, and finally he had an idea. He asked the genie for beautiful gifts to give to the princess. When the princess spoke to Aladdin to thank him for the gifts, she fell in love with him. They were married, and Aladdin asked the genie to build them a beautiful palace. Hearing that a wealthy stranger had married the princess, the sorcerer guessed that Aladdin must have escaped from the cave with the lamp. One day when Aladdin was out, the sorcerer disguised himself as a poor tradesman. He stood outside the palace calling out, "New lamps for old! New lamps for old!" Aladdin's wife remembered the ugly brass lamp that Aladdin kept and took it to the man. The sorcerer snatched it from her, rubbed the lamp, and commanded the genie to carry the palace and the princess far away to his own home in another country. "Where's my beautiful wife?" cried Aladdin when he returned home, wringing his hands in despair. As he did so, he rubbed the ring, and the first genie appeared. "What do you require, master?" the genie of the ring asked. "Please bring back my wife and palace," Aladdin pleaded. But the genie of the ring was less powerful than the genie of the lamp. "Then take me to her so that I can win her back," Aladdin said. At once he found himself in a strange city, but outside his own palace. Through a window he saw his wife crying and the sorcerer sleeping. Furious, Aladdin climbed in through a window and crept to the bedroom. He slipped the magic lamp from beneath the sorcerer's pillow and rubbed it. "What do you require, master?" asked the genie. "Take us straight back home," Aladdin said, "and shut this sorcerer in the cave for 1,000 years. That will teach him a lesson." In a moment the palace was back where it belonged. With the sorcerer gone, Aladdin and the princess were safe again. They lived long and happy lives together and never needed to call on the genie again. The end. How the Leopard Got His Spots. Long, long ago, Leopard lived on a hot, bare, sandy yellow plain in Africa. Giraffe and Zebra lived there too, along with lots of deer, big and small, young and old. The animals were sandy yellow all over, just like the plain itself. Leopard was sandy yellow too, which wasn't good for the rest of the animals because Leopard was hard to spot on the sandy yellow plain. He could lie in wait in the sandy yellow grasses, then jump out, catch them, and eat them up whenever he wanted to. Giraffe and Zebra and the rest of the animals lived in fear. Leopard, however, was very happy and never hungry. After a while, Giraffe and Zebra and the others had had enough. They decided to move away from the sandy plain to find a better place to live. They walked and walked until they came to a huge forest where the sun shone through the trees, making stripy, speckly, patchy shadows and sections of spotty, stripy sunshine. The animals hid themselves there, and while they hid, partly in the sun, partly in the shadows, their skins changed color. Giraffe's skin became covered with big brown blotchy spots from the blotchy shadow he stood in, and Zebra's skin became covered with stripes from the stripy shadow he lay in. The other animal's skin became darker too, with wavy lines and patterns from the shadows around them. Back on the sandy plain, Leopard was puzzled. All the animals had disappeared, and he was starting to get hungry. "Where have they all gone?" he asked Baboon. "To the forest," said Baboon carelessly. "And they've changed. You need to change too." Leopard started to ask Baboon what she meant by change, but baby Baboon needed feeding, so she was too busy to explain. Leopard set out for the forest. He walked, and at last he found it. But all he could see was tree trunks. They were speckled, spotted, dotted, and splashed with shadows. He couldn't see giraffe or zebra or any of the others, but he could smell them, so he knew they were there too. Leopard lay down to wait. After a long, long time, something moved in the shadows, and a small deer trotted toward him. But sandy yellow Leopard wasn't hidden in the leafy green forest, so the deer saw him at once and skipped away. All Leopard could reach was its tail. "I'm too small to fill your belly," cried the deer. "Please let me go." The deer was right about that. It was tiny and thin, and not really worth bothering about, but Leopard kept hold of its tail anyway. "What happened to all the animals?" asked Leopard. "We've all changed," the deer replied. "Now skins are speckly, spotty, dotty, and splashy, just like the shadows in the forest. You only caught me because I'm young. I should have been more careful." Leopard let the little deer go and sat down to think. "So that's why I can't see giraffe and zebra and the rest of them in the forest," he thought. "They've changed their skins to match the shadowy trees. If I'm going to catch them, do I need to change too? And how in the world can I do that?" As he sat there thinking, more deer walked through the trees. When they moved, Leopard could see them clearly. When they stopped moving, they were hidden by the shadows. Leopard was easy to spot with his sandy yellow skin, so the deer didn't come too close. Leopard sat in the shadows a long, long time and licked his paws thoughtfully. Soon he began to notice something odd. His paws weren't sandy yellow anymore. They had small, dark spots on them, and there were spots on his tail too. Leopard looked around and realized that the spots on his skin matched the small, dark patches of shadow he was lying in. "Aha!" he thought. "The shadows have made these spots just in time that I've been lying here. That's how I can change my skin, just like giraffe and zebra and the rest of them." By this time, Leopard had grown tired from all the thinking and waiting, so he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, a long, long time later, his skin was completely covered with small, dark spots made by the shadows of the forest. "Well, how wonderful!" he said, looking at his new skin. "Now my skin is no longer sandy yellow brownish. I can hide in the leafy green forest, so that giraffe and zebra and the rest of them can't see me. Then, when they come close, I can leap out to catch them and eat them up." With that, the spotty leopard set off into the speckly, blotchy, stripy shade of the deep forest, where he lived happily ever after, eating and sleeping and not being spotted. And the other animals learned to hide from him as best as they could too. The end.